I'd like to open the Board of Adjustment meeting for Thursday, December 4th, 2014. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing for a variance request at 411 South Highway 47. Mr. Graville, if you would please tell us what you need to tell us.
Thank you, Board of Adjustment. On behalf of the city, I would offer into the record the packet prepared by Jack Hamp, the zoning officer, to ask that that be made a part of the record. Also by reference, the ordinances of the city of Warrenton. The packet, essentially, there is a variance that's being applied for that is Lot 4 and Block 6 of the Schoengirt addition to the city of Warrenton, Missouri, located at 411 South Highway 47. The property is zoned RC2 Residential Commercial Plan District. The variance request is to allow part of the proposed residential structure to be within the required 30-foot front setback area and the required 25-foot rear setback area. So my understanding is it's actually a request for two variations of the setbacks. I would remind the Board of Adjustment of the criteria, and I want to read this into the record and ask that the Board of Adjustment make a finding so we can make a written findings that we'll ask you to approve after the vote. A written application, this is section 405.330 for the variances. A written application for a variance is submitted demonstrating special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land structure or building involved and which are not applicable to other land structures or buildings in the same district. 2, literal interpretation of the provisions of this chapter would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other property owners in the same district under the terms of this chapter. 3, the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. 4, granting the variance request will not confer on the applicant any special privileges that is denied by this chapter to owners of other land, structures, or buildings in the same district. And 5, no nonconforming use of neighboring land, structures, or buildings in the same district and no permitted use of land, structures, or buildings in other districts shall be considered grounds for the issuance of variance. And at this point, I would turn it over to the applicant to present his request for a variance, Mr. Brad Corder.
All right, Mr. Corder, if you'd step forward to the podium, please. Go ahead, sir.
What am I supposed to do?
Well, this is the public hearing, so at this time we allow comment from you as the applicant as well as comment from anyone else in the public for or against the issue. Then we'll have discussion and we'll ask questions of you in the regular portion of the Board of Adjustment meeting. So at this point, if you'll just give us a general synopsis, please.
I have already have the home. What I'm doing is trying to put it on to fit the lot, but it's 92 feet long with the garage, so I have to turn it sideways, facing south side instead of 47. Make it work. And I think it'd be better with having the driveway on the south side instead of 47 also. So.
Okay, and when you say you already have the home, this this is actually then to be located on that lot then?
Right.
Okay.
So you're moving the house?
Mm-hmm.
All right. We'll have possibly other questions for you and ask for other details then during the regular Board of Adjustment meeting.
Okay.
So,
thanks.
is there anyone else here that would like to speak on behalf of this issue or in opposition to the variance request? All right, we will close the public hearing and we will now move on to the regular agenda for the Board of Adjustment meeting, the first item of which is the reading of the minutes from the June 5th, 2014 meeting. I'd like to point out that the Board of Adjustment is a member or a panel of 5 members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and this evening the 5 members that will be part of the Board of Adjustment will be Mr. Barton, Mrs. Scott, Mr. Schwab, Mr. Dickey, and myself. So at this point, I'd entertain a motion or any corrections on the minutes from the June 5th meeting.
I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
And do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Scott, seconded by Mr. Schwab, to approve the minutes from the June 5th, 2014 Board of Adjustment meeting as presented. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes?
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
I will abstain. I was absent that month.
All right, so that motion carries by a vote of 4-0 with one abstention. And we will now move on to the second item on our agenda for Board of Adjustment this evening, and that is, in fact, the variance request by Mr. Corder for 411 South Highway 47. Mr. Graville read the criteria that we are bound by in the consideration of variance requests, and so the five of us then should just go ahead and ask any questions you may have of Mr. Corder, or make any discussion points you'd like to make.
Well, I was, excuse me, I was kind of thrown for a loop with the thing that he's already has the house and he's moving it, because I'm certain that you can build a house on the lot that will fit within the setbacks. So, and my point was going to be, is it a hardship or an inconvenience that the house he wants to build won't fit? And I don't know if it makes a difference that he already has the house or not. So, I mean, I'm pretty certain you could put a house on that lot without a variance, but probably not the one that he already owns. So that's my concern, and it basically says in the ordinance that you have the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land. And we're asking for variances in two different directions. So that, I have a concern with that. My other concern is that it will sit 7 feet off of the lot line. The property next to it could either be a commercial use or a residential use. Probably not as big a concern if it's a residential use, but if it's a commercial use and we ask that applicant to buffer that, there's going to be a fence probably on that lot line. So there will be a fence basically 7 feet from the back door of that house if it goes commercial, which you don't know what it's going to do in the future. So those were the concerns that I had as I read through the information.
What discussion items or questions do the rest of you have? We should remember that when we make our decision, it's Mr. Graville always asks us to have findings of fact so that we essentially either support our approval or support our disapproval of the motion. So keep in mind that as you review and you look at the 5 criteria, you'll want to be able to state when you vote whether it's affirmative or negative on what of those criteria you're basing that. Am I correct, Mr. Graville?
That's correct, yeah. And Scott, I would like to make one correction. I don't know if Teresa misread I converted the numbers that was on the plan that Mr. Corder submitted. And on the right side, if you're looking from 47 in, that's 9 feet, 9.26 feet, and not 7. Although the minimum sidelines would be 7, but the dimension that's shown on his plan is actually 9 feet, in case you didn't read it already.
9 feet from
It looks like from the corner of his proposed garage. Is that correct, sir?
to the property line
To the property
between
line.
the adjoining lot.
Yes.
Okay, so it's 9 feet, there's 9 feet back. But the required setback is
25.
25.
The garage can be moved up, that's the garage you're talking about. The house is 17.
So the house would be 17 feet. If he moves the garage from, I was just going off of what you'd submitted, sir.
Right.
One more thing for the Board of Adjustment, there is, Mr. Corridor did submit an A through E responding to the, does it meet these things that is in your packet, that is part of, he did address those particular issues, and I don't know if Mr. Corridor wants to elaborate on any of those particulars regarding the criteria. And just for the public's sake, a variance is the Board of Adjustment has very narrow authority to grant a variance when only these criteria are met, so that, you know, if there's any appeal, and that's part of the reason we have the written decision, if there is any appeal, there's basically an answer and a finding for each one of those criteria, whether they're met or not met, whether it's the applicant that would appeal or someone in the neighborhood that could appeal or somebody in the community that could appeal it. So, you know, there is in the packet that you know, for purposes of the public, there are answers to those various questions that are in the packet that has been made a part of the record. So I just wanted to make sure that that was, you know, that you guys have seen that, but the public may not have seen it.
Can't get that to
That's the last page of our packet of information on this particular issue.
I can't even get to there.
Brad, do you have a copy of that?
All right,
Okay,
thank
I don't know if you
I
want
to read it.
if you want to talk about that, if you want to address those questions at this point, if you want. He's got something.
Any of you have any questions for Mr. Corder? I kind of recognize Teresa's point that the criteria C, the special conditions and circumstances don't result from the actions of the applicant. Of course, the lot dimensions don't, but it's kind of difficult to make the argument that the deliberate placement of the house, to me, the deliberate placement of the house on that lot, knowing that those setbacks already exist, isn't it isn't a result of the actions of the applicant. That's the one that I don't know how we justify an argument that would say, well, it's not really the actions of the applicant putting the house there that caused that to be out of compliance.
And as far as he's got the special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land structure or building involved, and which are not applicable to other land structures or buildings in the same district. And his justification is that he doesn't want his driveway on 47, which I completely understand, not wanting the driveway on 47. But I think you can utilize the lot with the setbacks and not have your driveway off of 47. So, I just have a concern that we're kind of setting up. I know these never set precedences, but it's still, I just have a concern with that, so.
Well, one of the things we talked about just among staff was it is a unique piece of property in that it is on Highway 47, and which is a major roadway, which is a geographical issue to that particular property. Now, whether or not, is a unique geographical condition created by Highway 47. But I think, to your point, Teresa, that, there are, all these criteria have to be met. There's that one unique geographical it's not as though there's a structure already there that was built before planning and zoning. Can that kind of tie into all these conditions to meet it? But, I think we recognize from what Brad presented, Mr. Corder presented, was Highway 47 does create some unique geographical issues that may not be enjoyed or may not be an issue for the people that live the property directly behind them with regards to access and ingress and egress. But I think, to your point, it is a house that is being brought in that is, I don't know if it's a prefabbed house or what it is that is, is the house that he wants to bring in, not a house that's stick-built or not a house built for that particular piece of property. But we did discuss, and, based on what Mr. Corder presented, I think there is an argument that can be made that there's a unique geographical issue with regards to that, because Highway 47 is a busy roadway, it's a highway. But does it get you through to every piece of criteria? And that was really some of the things in reviewing his responses that we didn't know if we could go from A all the way through E to give a response on.
Well, I think if we were looking at this and someone were just simply building a home, electing to build a home of these dimensions and saying, because I want this configuration, I need these setbacks to be, I need a variance to the setbacks that exist. That's a pretty high bar to me, if someone were coming and saying, here's the house, here's the footprint of the house, I just need you to go ahead so I can buy the materials and sign the contract with my general contractor and build the house. And I have a hard time, because whether it's a prefab home, whether it's a home on a foundation somewhere else in town to be relocated here, whatever the case is, I have a hard time with differentiating from the concept of building it deliberately with the dimensions, which I wouldn't be inclined to say fits the criteria for a variance. And saying, because this is a prefab or some otherwise pre-existing home, that it somehow changes the consideration of that point for me. And I don't know, is it a home that is actually existing in town now, or is it?
Deer Run.
It's in Deer Run. And is the garage part of the home now and would move as part of the same move? Is the garage also part of the house in Deer Run?
Yes, attached, just like.
So it would all move as one combined attached?
No, I can move the garage and move it up or whatever. They put the house in, then built the garage on it.
I see that it looks like the dimensions, if I'm reading them correctly, it looks like the dimensions of the garage are 24 by 24. Okay. So the garage is 24 by 24?
Yes.
Brad, would you want to stay up at the mic so they can make sure they keep showing up on camera?
So if you move the garage up, you're still asking for, the backyard requirement is 30?
25.
The front is 30 and the back is 25.
All right, so you're still asking for a 10-foot variance off the front and a 16-foot variance off the back.
You went there. The way that picture shows that I submitted was it was 25 feet back from the street instead of 30.
There's the garage. The house fits on the setbacks without the garage, without any trouble, I'm assuming?
No.
Well,
No. Without the garage?
it's like 7 feet too far back.
Oh, because of the...
Because of the front doors facing
Because of the
south
front.
side,
Yeah, okay.
that's what creates the,
If
30
the
foot
house sat
front.
in there facing 47,
It's still too long.
that one is too long, but you could build a house that would fit if it faced off of 47, that would fit in the setbacks. There's one kind of catty corner from that property on, I think it's Southeast Street, where they had an unusual lot, and so they built a, not unusual house, but they built a house that was
Skinny,
long and skinny instead of, it was narrow, I guess, and long instead of wide. To fit the lot, they did have to have a variance, but I think it was a smaller variance off the back in order to get the 1,000 square foot and to actually fit it on the lot. But they tried to design a house to fit the lot instead of trying to make the lot fit the house.
Just as a point of order, we do need to have a motion and have a vote regarding, whatever ultimately our recommendation is. And the motion is always in the affirmative, so regardless of how you choose to go, whether you're in favor or don't, the motion would be in the affirmative, and we would vote yes or no.
Section 405-330, item D, says granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this chapter to owners of other land, structures, or buildings in the same district. It does. Because a house can be built within the specs of that lot. And somebody else could come in on another lot and say they want to build a big house, but it's out of spec and there's a variance. Or may ask for it, may not get it.
I recognize your point.
Well, I will make a motion so we can move on. And I will make a motion to, must be my husband, so I will make a motion to accept the variance as submitted. Is that correct wording?
And we'll need a second.
Second,
We have a motion by Mrs. Scott, seconded by Mr. Dickey to recommend approval, or to approve, actually. We don't, in this case, we don't recommend, we actually either approve or not, or don't. To approve the variance request for 411 South Highway 47. And before we go into our final discussion and roll call vote, when you vote, if you do vote affirmatively, then you'll be making a statement that you believe that the conditions have been met, the 5 criteria. If you vote no, we do need you to state which of the conditions you feel like it does not meet. Okay? Any other questions or comments or discussion? All right. Roll call vote.
Mr. Schwab?
I don't know what to do with this here.
Ask more questions if we need to.
Well, I don't even know what to ask about it. I'm kind of along the lines with Teresa. I think a house could be built on this to fit this configuration better, so. I would say that would be my, how would I word that then? Sort of
Well, we have the 5 criteria, so if your vote is yes, then you're saying that it meets those 5 criteria. If your vote is no, then you'd want to stipulate which of these 5, and they are.
I would vote no, that it doesn't meet the setbacks of this property. Then I would say okay.
Well, the 5 criteria that Mr. Graville laid out, the first is special conditions and circumstances exist that are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved. which are not applicable to the other land structures or buildings in the same district. That's the first one. Literal interpretation of the provisions of this chapter would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of this chapter. C, the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. D, granting the variance will not confer on the applicant special privileges denied by this chapter to owners of other land structures or buildings in the same district. And then the last one is more of a clarification that no non-conforming use of neighboring land structures or buildings in the same district and no permitted use of land structures or buildings in other districts shall be considered grounds for the issuance of the variance. So it's really the first four that you either agree with or disagree with. So among those, is there one or more in particular you feel like are the reason that you are voting no?
Well, it sounds like,
I still can't
it sounds
say
like D is the,
Okay. Well, and our finding will be of the five of us as a whole. So Mr. Schwab is voting no. Let's go ahead and get the votes of the rest and see what reasons are.
Yeah, what we maybe could do, Scott, if it's a no vote, then what we could do is we could probably go through each one of them, and then you could have discussions on it
Okay.
if it needs it.
Okay.
And then we could vote on each one. That may be a little clearer.
All right,
way to go.
that'll move it along then.
Mr. Dickey?
No.
Mr. Barton?
no.
Mrs. Scott?
No.
Mr. Costello?
No. So, as Mr. Greville indicated, so we've got 5 no's to 0 yeses. So we need to determine then which of these criteria the no applies to. So the first one, special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land structure or building involved and which are not applicable to other land structures or buildings in the same district. Does anyone feel like that was a reason in their judgment?
I don't think we can, I think it was stated that 47 did create a situation there, so that's not the one that's gonna cause it.
Anyone feel differently?
It creates a situation, but it creates the same situation
For everybody.
some of the other, well, not everybody, but every corner lot probably.
On 47.
Okay. All right. If no one disagrees, then moving on to B. Literal interpretation of the provisions of this chapter would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of this chapter. So essentially, by saying no, does this take away rights for this applicant that other people have?
No,
No.
it's still voted out.
Still voted
All right. Anyone feel differently on that one? Then we have number C, special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant.
We did say that there were special conditions. to some degree.
I mean, that's one, in my own particular vote, that's one that I believe that these conditions don't exist unless the applicant puts the house there. So in my opinion, this was one that is a factor in me feeling like it doesn't meet the criteria for variance.
So you guys in agreement, that's a
Is there
no,
anyone that
yeah,
doesn't
okay,
feel
right there.
that that one is part of it? But, okay. And then D, granting the variance will not confer on the applicant special privilege that is denied by this chapter to owners of other land structures or buildings in the same district.
And there again, I think it would, because we expect everyone to meet those setbacks, and variances would only be granted in order to make possible reasonable use of the property.
Anyone feel differently on that? And then finally, again, I think item E is more a matter of clarification, that it does, that granting of the variance wouldn't confer grounds for issuance of the variance based on other similar lands. So, the way I'm hearing it then, item items C and D have not been met in the granting of variance. Is everyone comfortable with that? So, Mr. Greville, that I believe would be our fine.
That's fine. No, because that's more of a clarification. I think when they answer no to D, then I think it basically answers E if they, that would be a conditional criteria. If they didn't have,
And again, Board of Adjustment issues do not come before the Board of Aldermen. They are a final decision. So at this point, that variance request is not going to be granted. It is the last item on our agenda for Board of Adjustment. So do we need a motion to close BOA?
Yeah, I would ask.
So I'd entertain a motion to close Board of Adjustment.
Make a motion to close the Board of Adjustment meeting tonight?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Barton, second by Mr. Dickey to close Board of Adjustment. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, Board of Adjustment is adjourned, and Mr. Barton now will handle the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. This time, we'd like to open the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for December 4th, 2014. And our first order of business will be our public hearings. And our first public hearing will be Section 405.210, home occupations. Mr. Camp, you'd like to take that for us?
Good evening, everyone. First item I have is a text amendment request to Section 405.210, home occupations, ADM 69. I would like to ask, make part of the public hearing record, the municipal code by reference, the public hearing notices, and my planning and zoning report. On October 31st, 2014, a request was filed for text amendment approval to Section 405.210E10 regarding home occupations. And the request is to allow them to operate a child care within the home in a residential area within Warrenton city limits.
Anyone here to speak for that or against? Step to the podium, state your name.
Hello, thank you for having us. My name is Tiffany Rivera. I'm Lacey Rivera, and we are the proposed co-owners of the in-home childcare Little Sprout. We are requesting that we amend the text or the rule, or I'm not really sure how it works, to be honest with you. We're just kind of going with it. But we would like to operate an in-home childcare. We are working with the state right now with becoming licensed and stuff like that before we found out that there was a zoning issue because we're zoned residential. And we are complying with them completely, going above and beyond what they're asking. And we found out it's prohibited within the Warrenton city limits, within the residential area. So we're asking that it be allowed, or if we were allowed special circumstance, or I'm not really sure, but we can propose what you do. We have to, I don't know, we're allowed to, if we get our license, we're hoping to have that before February, we're allowed to watch 10 children that are not related to us. And we have also informed those on Richmond Drive, which is where it'd be located. We gave them all our information. If they had any questions, concerns, to go ahead and please talk to us. We let them know that we were there, and that we hope that we wouldn't be adding much added traffic. And we let them know our operating hours. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be ready for questions in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here tonight to speak? Thank you, sir.
My name is Richard Taylor. I am Tiffany's stepfather. This building is at the end of a cul-de-sac on a very slowly traveled street. It's not too far from the Agape thrift shop, as a matter of fact, just down the road from there. They've worked really hard to make this room at the end of the house into a safe and lively daycare center. They've passed every inspection that's been done over there, and they're really looking forward to getting their business moving with the intention, when they get to the point that they can, move to a commercial location. Simply can't afford to do the commercial location initially.
Thank you.
And for the record, there has been no building permit, modification permit issued
Right.
for the work that they're discussing.
Anyone else here to speak tonight? Hearing none, we'll close that public hearing and open up our second public hearing, which is section 425, sign regulations.
This is a text amendment request to section 425, sign regulations, ADM 68. Once again, I'd like to ask to make part of the public hearing record the municipal code by reference, the planning and zoning report, and my public hearing notices. Per ordinance number 2182 dated July 15th, 2014, banner signs no longer require a permit, and we're asking to change the section 425.120 to include banner signs as sign types that do not require a permit. Just to clean up something we missed.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak about that issue? Hearing none, we'll close that public hearing and open up our next public hearing, which will be Harbor Place, Site Plan 87.
This is a site plan approval request for Harbor Place, SP 87. I'd like to make part of the public hearing record the municipal code by reference, my plan and zoning report, and the public hearing notices. This proposed property is located along the east side of Highway 47, opposite Villa Duchesne Drive. Property is zoned C2, general commercial, and the request is for site plan approval.
Anyone here to speak on behalf of that? Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Commission. I appreciate your time tonight. My name is Kurt Daniels with Cochran Engineering. Along with me tonight in the back is Jeff Blanton, the proposed owner of this facility and developer. Jack did a very good job explaining where it is and really what our request is. I'll tell you a little bit about the layout of the site. What we're looking at is a 1.66 acre site. On the site, we will have a proposed access off Highway 40 with the parking up at the front. Required parking places are 7. We've provided 13 parking places. We'll have on the northern side of it an access point to get towards the rear of the building. We'll also have a trash enclosure there. The proposed building is about 72,409 square feet. In the rear of the area, we've provided detention to control any stormwater that might be increased due to this development. We do have a large green space in the rear of the area. The overall site is 1.662 acres. Open space is about 1.07. So we're actually percentage-wise about 65% open space. So with that, I don't think there's a lot more traffic will enter here. There will be a little drop-off area at the front, also an area for emergency vehicles or whatever to pick up at the front door. If the commission had any other questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to add one more thing.
Thank you, Mr. Hemp.
Per Appendix A, 1 residential, B group living, residential care and assisted living facilities, a conditional use permit is required. This site plan approval request has been submitted by the applicant along with the conditional use permit approval request as required by section 405.340C8.
Anyone else not like to speak on that? Hearing none, we'll close that public hearing and open up our last public hearing, which will be the Harbor Place Conditional Use Plan 39.
This is a conditional use permit approval request for Harbor Place, CUP 39. I'd like to make part of the public hearing record the municipal code by reference, my planning and zoning report, and the public hearing notices. Once again, this is the property along the east side of Highway 47 opposite Villa Duchesne Drive. Property is zoned C2 general commercial. On September 5th, 2014, a request was filed for conditional use permit approval for an assisted living facility to be located along the east side of Highway 47, opposite Villa Duchesne Drive. And also on tonight's agenda, it'll be the location of proposed Warrior Acres, Lot 2, Plat 1. This request has been submitted along with the site plan approval request as required for section 405.340C8 of the code.
Thank you, Mr. Happ. Anyone to speak on this issue? Mr. Daniels?
Again, for the record, Kurt Daniels with Cochran Engineering. Probably don't have anything else to add. We just ask for your favorable recommendation as required for conditional use for the assisted living residential facility.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else to speak tonight on this issue? Hearing none, we'll close our public hearings for this evening and open up our regular planning and zoning meeting for tonight. First order of business will be the minutes from the November 6th meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the November 6th meeting as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Costello, second by Mr. Cullum, to approve the minutes as submitted. Any comments or questions? Roll call vote?
Mr. Cullen?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
I abstain, I was not there.
Mr. Durden?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 with 1 abstention and 2 absent. First order of business will be the section 405.210, home occupations.
I have a question, just probably more for either maybe Jack or Chris, but I know we currently have daycares operating in homes in our 2 districts. So how are they operating, I guess, is the question.
And that's actually what I'm looking up, and that wasn't part of the packet, but if you guys recall, and they may be able to answer this, you can have 4 children without a state license?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically what we've always done, like what most cities do, is that it's not a daycare if it's 4
Or less.
or less, not including
Related children.
related children. So if you have 2 kids, you can have 4 additional kids, and it's not considered a daycare. So we've just always, so the daycares that you have, and I know there's various ones that are considered in-home daycares, it's 4 kids that are not related to the kids that are there. And so that's how we've always defined it, as in a home occupation. That is not considered a daycare because the state doesn't require that to be licensed, correct?
Right, that's
And
correct.
do you guys have 4 kids, not related kids now that are there?
We have less than 4.
Less than
Right.
4. So
Mhm.
they're operating not as a daycare now, but what you guys want to do now is they want to increase.
Become licensed, and a maximum would be, with the state license, within the home, we can only have 10 children non-related. So that's what we're wanting to do. We can't have more than 10, because it would be an in-home childcare. Versus if we were a commercial, we can have more, depending on ratio, but because of square footage, not just that, but they're only allowing in-home daycares to have no more than 10 non-related children.
So that's a state regulation.
Yes.
So we've just always mirrored that state regulation where it's 4 or less is not considered a daycare. And yes, there are people that may have 5 or 6 children, and then if we find out, and I've been involved in situations here and in other municipalities, if they're reported to, the licensing agency, which is what, Department of Health and Human Services.
Yes.
If they're reported, then it's like a big, they send a certified letter and then they shut you down. They want you prosecuted through the state court because you're operating without a license and, all the regulations that apply. So like most cities, it's a home occupation in that it's allowed because it's less than 4, because you're not required to have a state license. And so that's where you see it, Teresa, is that they have 4 kids or an in-home daycare, but they don't have more than 4 kids that are unrelated to their own children.
I knew there was an answer to that, I tried to find it today, and I couldn't find it.
Well, that's,
And when we spoke on the phone, that's why I sent her the different options for the text amendment and this and that, because their
Right.
goal is to get to 10,
Yes.
correct? And
Right.
then one day get an actual commercial site.
Yes.
I understood it, and that's why I was just letting her know, there's
possibilities or ways to address this, but as where they're at right now, they can't legally have 10 children in there.
Right.
Whether or
So-
not the state licensed them or not.
Basically-
The city code would not allow it.
We've broken it down. If you need a license, it cannot be in a residence. And that's when the state, over 4 is when the state requires you to get a license.
But for the RC1 district and on up, it's allowed in all of those districts as a conditional use, actually.
I believe so,
Correct.
yes, correct. Under the.
And when did you
Oh,
say
RC.
that you?
I'm sorry?
When did you
RC1 and
say
beyond
that
its
you're getting
condition,
your
except for
license?
C4.
Well, we're in the process of doing it. Once you submit your application, you have 6 months to complete all the requirements, including fire and safety and sanitation inspections. So right now, we are in the process of completing our inspections, and then if we don't have that completed by February, then we have to start the whole process all over again. So, but before we kind of got, when state came out and talked to us, they said, well, you need to contact zoning, and so we did, and that's when we came to a screeching halt, because we can't make any further adjustments to the home to meet fire safety, their inspection, because if we can't pass the inspection, I mean, there's no point in going forward if we can't operate. And the only reason why we want to do it within the home is because it takes a lot of money to start a business, so we have to start somewhere. And with us being both stay-at-home moms, I mean, in this economy, it's really hard. But our long-term goal is hopefully within the next year or two to be an actual facility.
Where in the home would you operate this?
I did bring a diagram, and I'm sorry that I did not submit that for the record. But it's in the back of the house. Now, to elaborate on what Mr. Haniff was saying, we did not rebuild a room. We didn't do anything like that. She had an empty room in her house that we replaced the floors, we painted, and it's a complete playroom. And we're not taking any children under the age of 1 because we don't have space for the nursery and the cribs, and we honestly don't have the staffing. So we're taking preferably ages 1 through 5. So it's more toys, developmental, that kind of stuff. And then the nap time would happen in the living room area because of a fire safety reason. We cannot have them nap in the playroom because of ceiling height. So they will be using the living space for that in the living room, and then obviously the kitchen and the bathroom to prepare food, and which I'm also ServSafe certified. So
My concern would be, it's 10 children unrelated to you, but I think I read in here somewhere, you guys have 5 kids?
yes, 2 of hers are in school.
And
So
then
she has a 1-year-old and I have a 1 and a 2-year-old. That would be there.
I mean, I guess in theory, in other situations, I don't remember what degree that regulation prohibits or defines as a family member. I spoke to him, I know it's, in theory, you could have other related children there also that wouldn't count towards the 10.
Yeah, that is true. It's up to like cousins and stuff like that. But we don't have any of those. We're only taking our children and then others. We're not taking on any other related children. That's just too much to handle. I mean, that's the state is up to 10 children, and that's with 1 operator, and we're doing it together. So we figured it'd be a lot more hands-on and a lot more observation, and so it wouldn't get out of hand.
Would
So
3 people allow you to have more kids?
no.
What is the state ratio? Because even with additional kids, you still have to be within the ratio, is that correct?
Not the ratio for the in-home. The ratio is only for commercial.
What is the ratio
It-
for commercials? Is it 4 to 1?
It depends on the age group.
For
4 to 1 is infants.
infants.
Yeah.
It's
and
5 to 1 for 1 to 3, is that right?
I believe so. Oh, no, it
It's
is
8
8
to
to 1.
1.
And then
8 to
it's
1.
20 to 1 for like pre-K and up.
So, keeping with that idea, you'd say that your long-term objective is to have
A facility.
what you would call a commercial facility?
Yes, I mean, where we wouldn't be there, we would relocate and actually
And-
find a commercial.
And you're saying that you can be a state licensed facility in a residence and have no ratio requirements whatsoever?
Right, because they go by square footage. So, I mean, even if her house was smaller, we couldn't have up to the 10. The state license in a home allows up to 10 children depending on the square footage, but her house is big enough that we can have up to that 10.
And the reason that I'm asking this question is what I see this being, not in your case necessarily.
Right.
But it brings up the one thing I always bring up when we talk about zoning, when we talk about the actual zoning appendix that you're asking us to revise.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Hant, the request is to make a permitted occupancy in R2, correct? Not
They weren't
conditional.
asking about changing the Appendix A, they were asking about changing the section of code under home occupation.
Okay, so,
Is what the
so,
letter states.
so we would be changing our code to say that that particular home occupation, which is in-home daycare, is now permitted.
With this suggestion, if you don't mind interrupting, we were talking about that, and we wouldn't just say permitted. I mean, we would say maybe with the suggestion, if it's permitted if you're state licensed or something like along those lines. I mean.
I see, and I see that. The concern I have is that in a home of a certain square footage, it sounds to me, based on what you're telling me on the ratios, that by going to the state to be licensed, and doing this in a home, that you really don't have any ratio restrictions whatsoever. It's just simply, does the square footage allow that number of children, whether it's 2 kids or 12 kids or 24
Right,
kids?
there is one ratio problem, but that has to do with infants, and we're not taking infants.
Right. So, that's the point that I am a little bit stuck on, is that, again, I don't see that this is your intent
Right.
by asking for this text amendment change to where this home occupation becomes permitted. But someone else later on down the line, the unintended consequence of us recommending this and the Board of Aldermen eventually perhaps passing it is that someone else could come along and decide they've got the square footage to justify up to 20 kids, and it's just that one caregiver by themselves, and the state has no, because it's in a home.
No idea,
The state has no ratio authority, and we end up with a situation that could be patently unsafe.
Right.
And again, I know that's not where you're going,
Right.
but I think it's a consideration that we and the Board of Aldermen have to take very seriously.
I think would the state ever let you have more than 10 unrelated kids in the house, no matter
No.
what size it was?
No, and they
But you
have,
could
you can have up to
as
10,
many-
there's no more than 10 unless you are in a facility.
Unrelated kids.
Right, unrelated children.
But you could have related
Yeah,
children.
if I had a
There's no-
bajillion cousins.
That's where
yeah.
the ratio comes into
Right.
effect.
Right. Now, like I said, I can't recommend what other people might do, but like I said, this would be a somewhat temporary position for us. And from what my understanding is with state, they do, within 2 years of your license, they do 3 surprise inspections where you have no idea when they're coming, and 1 scheduled inspection. So, I mean, even if they came to the house and we had 1 more than what we're supposed to have, we're immediately shut down. So,
The text amendment that was proposed is simply to take that out of the list of things that's not a possibility that can't be considered a home business. It specifically states in there that you cannot have a daycare.
Right, and we've
Is a
defined
home
daycare
business.
the way the state defines it, which is less than 4, you know.
Okay, so if you, in addition to that, looked at Appendix A and made it a conditional use, then you would have to see anybody that wanted to do that, and you could put any conditions on it that you wanted. You could say you can have no more than 10 children, related or unrelated.
It definitely would take some, yes, it would take some drafting. One of the things that I'm concerned about, though, you guys are trying to meet a February deadline, correct?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have to replace the kitchen sink and stuff like that for sanitation inspection, and we're trying to get all that done, but like I said, we came to a screeching halt when we found out we were stuck.
But I think that you could make that in the appendix,
Right.
Scott. You could make that a conditional use, and then obviously you could review it because you would require state licenses and whatnot.
Well, that was my question too. You said there was different options. What they're asking through this process is for us to change something permanently for a temporary use.
Right.
That bothers me. I mean, I'm all for them doing this. We need this.
And I think that's where Ms. Scott's logical conclusion
That's what I'm
was.
saying. That's where she's
If we make
going.
it conditional, you look at a conditional, the problem is, we don't have it on for a public hearing to change the appendix. We're gonna have to go back and, we could do it, we're gonna go out and back and draft it for, because here's the reality of it is, we would have to put it on next meeting, public hearing to change conditional use, which we can absolutely do, and change that take it out of the home occupation, make it conditional, and then it would go, which would put it on next meeting, planning and zoning in January, then would go to the board the second meeting in January, but then they would have to come back and apply for a conditional use in basically February, if that amendment and that conditional use passes to the Board of Aldermen. That would then probably put them in March.
Or we have to start all over again.
Where you guys would have to start all over again. So that's the thing that, and I think because a permanent change versus temporary as a conditional use would work, if that's the way you guys want to go, but I don't know that it would meet your guys' timeline.
Well,
Right?
I'm
I mean,
not
Jack, do you agree with that
Well, what?
timeline?
Yeah.
Because then you would have to come
But I
back to
mean,
a public hearing.
Surely the state, well, not surely the state would do anything, but,
Is that a hard and fast deadline with the state by the Fed?
that's what I'm thinking, that they could approach the state and say, based on the recommendation
So
of
what do
this
they need
board.
from the state, the city's approval?
No.
What exactly do you need from the state, the city's approval?
Or the state says
Well,
unless
they
you
didn't
meet.
even, to be honest with you, they just said to check with zoning. They didn't say and follow their anything. I mean, we were talking to our state person about it, and she said that she would more than happy answer any questions that you guys may have and to pass on her information if you'd like it. But Wendy said that,
What is the February deadline?
Because technically.
because
they
you
could-
have 6 months. You have 6 months from when you apply to complete and be completely done, or you have to start over.
And then how long is the process?
September, it was the beginning of September, correct?
September
No.
what?
Was it September 15th? September 15th.
So that's,
Is the requirement from the state that you're
I thought we
actually,
started at the end of October, but I could be wrong, sorry.
doesn't that give you till March?
March 15th. Sounds like March
I think we
15th.
submitted the application in October, sorry about that.
If it was October.
And you got 6 months to get this done?
Yes.
Well, you got plenty of
I
time.
did say- Yes.
That would give you
It-
until March to do that, does that? would that-
Well, yeah, I could, but that's assuming that.
He's
Well,
saying
we could have been under the
everything's
wrong
tentative
impression
on what
by,
everybody's saying, and there's not a meeting cancellation, and
what exactly is
I
the
just wanted to
requirements you have to meet with the state? Is
Well,
it just to have
They
your
probably have
house
to meet all local
modified?
Yeah.
zoning
we have
regulations.
to, they basically said that we need to pass the state inspection itself, which is all the safety requirements, then fire safety, then sanitation. And all they said was to check with zoning. They didn't say, they just wanted to make sure that had the special permits or whatever that our city requires. They don't
Yeah,
have
I-
a set rule.
I mean, they could proceed at.
Well, no, I mean,
Right.
typically, in my dealings with them on an enforcement level, purely an enforcement, not on a licensing, they try to work very close with the local government agencies, because they will then turn to them to assist them in enforcing, because they'll want, for example, if you guys were out of ratio, they'll come back and ask either the municipal or the state prosecutor to prosecute them under the local zoning ordinance,
Right.
under the local whatever, because enforcement becomes an issue for them, because they want people prosecuted that are not in compliance. So I'm sure they make that as a requirement, like we do, comply with all local, state, and federal
Right.
requirements, and you have to, show, or they may contact the city, are they in compliance, because they'll come back to the city on the enforcement end to make sure that they're in compliance. And my purpose of going through the timeline is, when Ms. Scott talked about the condition, maybe putting it in the appendix, that's gonna take, we're gonna have to have a public hearing for that change, we'll have to draft a public hearing for that change, and then a public hearing at the board level to make that change, and then a public hearing for your application for a conditional use permit and a site plan. and then public hearing in front of the Board of Aldermen. So you're talking 4 additional public hearings on it.
2 months.
2 months minimum is what that puts it out. And I just wanted to say that for purposes of
Right.
full disclosure, because I don't understand the
Sure.
application process to say, is this a deal killer? Because, if we're leaning that direction, that's what it's gonna take to get it done.
The reason why we chose to do the amending the text is we weren't wanting to change it to a yes or no. I was under the impression that we could amend it to say, unless you're state licensed or specially permitted. I didn't realize that there was a whole Appendix B. on
Well,
that.
no, I think Ms. Scott's point was, and I think Mr. Barton's point, and I don't wanna
Right.
explain it, but that's a permanent change that says it's yes or no. By doing it as a conditional use, what a conditional use does, basically it vests the right to use your property that way with special conditions. So then they can look at each individual project and say, well, based on this layout or this neighborhood or this, we want to grant it or we want to deny it. So that, I think they both kind of.
In my 17 years on this board, we're very careful about not opening up a can of worms that doesn't need to be opened up. We trust you,
Right.
but under a conditional use permit, everybody has to come in front of us.
And
But if
that's
you change it the way you
understandable.
do it, the way this is worded, if you change it, then anybody could, as long as they fit
Well,
the.
a high traffic area neighborhood or, a neighborhood that may not be as like, your stepfather said, that may
Exactly.
not be situated as well for a.
Well, and the other thing is, it's
daycare.
not in the appendix at all, which in
Right.
my opinion, it's not permitted and it's not conditional,
Right.
which means it's not allowed.
Right.
So unless you change the appendix,
It won't matter.
and if you don't change the appendix, but you do change the text, then you have a conflict in the ordinance.
Right.
You almost have to do either both
Good job.
or neither.
Right.
So, and so I don't have a problem with what they're trying to do. I think it's awesome. But we just need to figure out how to set it up so that it's right. And I guess she could do a conditional use at the same time we're doing at the same time we're changing it.
I
Can
don't
she
know that
apply
they
for it
can-
on the same meeting?
I wouldn't think so, because you're saying it has to go through the Board of Aldermen too, and
Well,
that's.
can you apply for something that's not yet allowable, can you guys approve something that the board, I don't think you can.
Right.
I don't think you guys could approve an application for a conditional use when the board doesn't approve the ordinance change.
So, Jack, with what they would have to do with their, you said sanitation or the sinks or things of that nature,
Yeah.
what changes would they have to make to their home now to be able to align them with getting their certification at the same time that this was going on in the background for future state? I don't
I have no information on what kind of modifications they're doing to their home.
I think what we would probably do in drafting would be kind of the internal, would be related to the state license, and we tie that to the state license. And probably, and I'm trying to look at my crystal ball, but we'd probably look more at ingress egress issues outside, drop off pickup, safety issues outside, because, I kind of think of it as, it's kind of like commercial buildings, the fire department does the inspections and the inside, we look at the outside on, certain commercial changes. And that kind of would be, as I think about drafting this, we would basically tie all the internal modifications or internal requirements. You have to be state licensed and stay in compliance with the state license at all times. However, I'm sure the state probably doesn't look at your driveway, parking spaces, ingress, egress, those type of things.
No,
Very
but-
basically,
Right.
that's probably where we would look at, so
If
we
they
could
look
avoid.
outside, it's just the play area in the
Yeah,
backyard,
so
it's
we,
not
that,
front.
and so to your point, which I think is a great point, is kind of avoid the overlap and redundancies. That would be kind of how I would envision we would draft it and review a site plan, Because that's what we do on, that's been a big theme, is avoiding redundant inspections or reviews. That's kind of my thought on, how we would kind of look at it, or at least theoretically draft a change to
And
it.
I understand. Their concern is, I don't want to put a whole lot of money into this project.
Till they have
It's not
approval.
going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And they can't get the approvals they need from the state until they put the money into it.
Right.
So I mean,
Exactly.
I get it. So, just trying to figure out what the,
We can.
Do you know
bring-
if there's any way to get an extension from the state? If you
They
let them
said
know
that
you're going
after
through
6
the
months, we have to
planning
reapply
and
and do
zoning?
it all over again. At least that's what we were told. As far as I know, you can't get a special where they extend the time or anything like that. Once that 6-month counter hits, you have to reapply and start the inspections and processes all over again. And it's just getting, it's not the fact that, I mean, if we had to have them come back and start the whole process over again, at least we know what they're looking for and it'll be completed. But it's the waiting for them to get there. I mean, just to have the state fire marshal come out, it takes a long time. And I mean, we've already been 4 months into this and we're just now getting to the sanitation inspection part. So, I mean, we've had to wait this long.
Right now, they could do business with 4 children.
And the unrelated children, yeah.
And not,
Right.
And not have to
anything.
get licensed, correct.
Right.
Not considered a daycare.
That's correct.
Right.
Because it's 4 in the house. It's not 4 for you and 4 for you.
No, it's 4 within the house.
Unrelated.
Yeah.
Unrelated children, yes.
No, yeah.
I mean, do you guys want us to draft something and set a public hearing and bring it back next meeting and just see how we can kind of get this done? You know, put it in the appendix, make it conditional, make a change to home occupation and look at that. So it's kind of along that thought process instead of just a permanent change, or how do you guys want to attack it?
I don't think we want to make it I don't think we want to make it permitted.
Yeah, I appreciate the conditional aspect of it and not the permitted for anyone.
And this may actually be, may help some other daycares to grow as well. Or allow some other daycares to grow, so.
And will we want to, if we're redrafting this, do it for R1, R2, and R3?
I would just stick with R2 and R3. We haven't had a request in R1, but we don't want to really skip around and.
That's a good idea.
Okay. Yeah, because there are 2.
Do you need any further information from us at all with this new?
if you're asked by the state, you have talked to the zoning board.
Yeah.
However, that's one of 2 boards. And
Yeah.
we could give it our blessing and it could get
True.
overturned
That's
at the board level, so I.
Yeah,
you know,
it's still gonna
there's-
come, no matter how we vote, it's still gonna come in front of the Board of Aldermen,
Right.
and you're gonna express your opinion there as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know,
And I do want to, so since you're on a time frame and since there's 2 different groups, you mentioned someone by name that's your representative from the state.
Yes.
Can you ensure if you've got a good relationship with them that they can speak to Jack and
Absolutely.
verify if there's anything that they need, that he needs, that they're gonna align?
Yeah, sure.
So that it's not the last minute and then there's something that we've got or they want that's missed?
Absolutely.
Because it might be helpful if we can even send him a letter to let him know you're in the process of resolving this, if that'd be
Right.
helpful to you.
Okay.
So would we be tabling this and starting over?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I just want to kind of do a little summation, and I want you guys to ask any questions so you have a full understanding, is that essentially, planning and zoning wants to allow you to do this in this house, but because you're only coming here at the 4th month and you guys are on a time frame,
Right.
that the change they want to make is very similar to a lot of approved, especially in a residential where it's the most sensitive. A lot of the approvals where they basically want to not just say, hey, everybody can do it. We want to look at the particular piece of land like they do it in conditional uses, like the assisted living facility is a conditional use that's coming up in front of here where they apply for it and they apply for the conditional use. So, you know, you said, do you guys need to do anything else or need to appear? What we'll do is, and if it's okay with you guys, since they want to make it as a conditional use, table this. We'll have to have a new public hearing for, you know, basically 2 text amendments at the next meeting. I'd encourage you guys to be at the next 2 planning and zoning meetings, just so you can kind of keep track of the progress and answer any questions
Sure.
that may come up, since it's specifically yours. But there'll be another planning and zoning meeting, another Board of Aldermen meeting, then you know, assuming everything goes through, and then you'll have to come back and do an application for a conditional use and site plan for your property. That's probably very similar to what you guys have already done with the state. I'm sure you had to give a drawing to the state
Right.
and show this is where it's going to be, and that's basically kind of what it is. Jack is with the city here. He's here full-time, so he can answer those questions. But my thought would be, I don't even know if we necessarily need to table a vote, but it may be better to, have a motion to table it, and then we can work on, because really, they're two very small changes, Teresa, putting that in there. I think it's just the appendix and the home occupation. I don't know that we really have to put anything laborious into it, so.
And the home occupation sort of already says, unless specifically permitted by the zoning district.
Yeah, it's really
So
just the
it's basically
appendix.
just changing the appendix then, if we're gonna go that route.
Make it conditional, so we'll get that ready for the next meeting.
Okay. And the next meeting will probably be on the 8th instead of the 1st, since the 1st is on the, you know what I'm saying?
Which would be helpful for public hearing requirements, because that's what I was just looking at to make sure
We're gonna be tight.
we can get them in the paper in time. So that would be helpful to kick it back to the.
Because we always meet on the first Thursday, but the 1st is the 1st, so
Yeah.
next month will be the 8th, so,
Okay.
correct?
I mean, no matter what, we want to see this through, so.
Sure.
Yeah,
We'll let you
and
know
that's
if-
really the question is that,
Yeah.
you guys want to see it through, so I would make sure, because you guys do a great job of answering the questions, you can answer questions if it comes up.
Very well organized. We appreciate that.
Thank you. A little nervous, but
Yeah,
we got
well,
it.
That's awesome, though. Good luck.
Thank you so very much.
So we'll take a motion to,
Table.
entertain a motion to table this.
We'll move.
Give me something in writing. So we just take.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Dickey, second by Mrs. Scott to table section 405.210 home occupations. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cullen?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 with 3 absent. And Mr. Costello apologized for having to step out, so he'll be missing the rest of the meeting. Next order of business will be section 425, sign regulations.
This is basically what I mentioned earlier. When we revised the sign code back in July, we missed one of the cross-references in section 425.120. I'd just like to add that the banner signs no longer need the permit either, just to clean that up.
Make a motion to accept section 425.120 as presented and amended.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Scott, second by Mr. Dickey to approve section 425 sign regulations as submitted. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cullen?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 with 3 absent. Next order of business will be Warrior Acres Lot 2, Plat 1, Subdivision 52.
This is the subdivision request for Warrior Acres, Lot 2, Plat 1, preliminary and final. Could you pull that one up, Randy? Casey wants it. Yeah. Yeah, one down, yeah. One down. Keep going. Up. There's the final plat. I don't know if there's a way to twist that one. Yeah. There you go. Rotate view. There we go.
So basically, they're dividing that.
Yeah, it's a 5-acre lot currently, part of the original Warrior Acres, and they're cutting out 1.66 acres
For the project.
for the proposed assisted living facility. And
They're
this-
basically just moving the lot line.
Well, they're taking a 5-acre lot and dividing it into 2 lots.
Oh, that's right, they're redividing the, okay, I was looking at the bigger plan.
And Kurt's here
Never
if you
mind.
have any specific questions for him. They did the survey and they're doing the drawings for the site plan too. And there is existing escrows in place on the 5-acre lot. Once this gets through a little farther and it's determined exactly what's gonna be permitted, they'll be putting together numbers for replacement escrows for Guy to approve. and then we can release the original escrows that's on there. Or you put in a request for it and get it turned back for you.
So, I mean, I don't know if this is the time for this question. There's going to be one entrance into that 1/6.
That is correct. There will be, on the site plan, it's shown.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
With one entrance. There's not enough highway frontage to get
That's
two
what I figured.
entrances on that area.
And can you kind of, I don't know if there's a picture on here.
Can you bring up that, what he's got there?
That'll be the next one down, Randy.
Just-
There you go.
In reference to the property across the street, where does this driveway enter versus that driveway that goes into Villa de Chien?
It's probably gonna be just about opposite.
Yeah, it's really close to being directly opposite. We always try to line them up directly opposite. That's the way the state wants them. We're fairly
Okay.
close to it.
It does show. So it's pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay. Because my concern, is always my concern at that, because I live in that area, and we have the other assisted living complex there. And years ago, they were originally going to use Whispering Pine as the entrance to that property. And we asked them not to, because that is the most dangerous intersection in the city. And I just wanted to make sure that this one, if that's going to be a facility like it is,
Yes.
exit on that 47 is going to be paramount for safety purposes.
It is, absolutely, and we'll take that into account.
And I figured MoDOT would be involved in that as well.
Absolutely.
And that's why Warrior Ridge even exists today, is because of that whole situation.
And Rich,
If you're not
Randy's
aware of
gonna
that.
pull up the site plan
Yeah.
drawing, because it actually shows Villa Duchesne.
He just showed me.
Relationship to it.
Yeah, and he just showed me, I caught it there.
She'll get it brought up here.
Cool. I mean, that has no bearing on what we're doing on this one, but
Yeah.
I was thinking ahead already, so. Does anybody have any questions at this time for the Warrior Acres Lot 2, Plat 1?
I have a question, and
Yes, sir.
it being on the fact of, and I don't know what our schedule is, but I'm assumed that there's gonna be a turn lane put eventually from all the way down through the area, which, and I was wondering how they're planning on the traffic. Is this gonna be set up that in the future, if we do have the turn lane in
47
the
is
center?
MoDOT's responsibility.
Yeah.
So
But I'm just
not
saying,
aware of
are
any.
we planning on the factor of them being able to, if MoDOT comes in, this property is gonna be set up, that will, it will be able for them to have a turn lane and still take care of, still be in the city's specs for the property and everything.
Yeah, that would be addressed. I'm sure you've
Yeah, that'll be
contact
addressed with MoDOT. If
need
there's any
their
type of
permit.
turn lane or anything like that, or need a right of way, I mean, they'll address that with us.
We need that soon.
Well, I think that's a great point, is that the idea being, and I don't want to, but some of the properties on 47 got
Right.
shortened when they came in and did it, and MoDOT didn't really care about their ingress egress. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, and that's the same thing earlier is, I'm gonna think that we're gonna be eventually putting at least a turn lane. I know it's not wide enough, to put the 4-lane like we have in the other places, but there should be room, there should be a turn lane. And is that, you'll say, that's what needs to be, that's my concern.
And with,
I think one of the things you guys could do is you could ask, I'm sure you, Kurt, somebody with MoDOT that you can inquire and say, is there future plans that would affect putting a turn lane in or something that,
Well-
the location on the property?
Absolutely.
And the thing is, down there on South 47, the kind of facilities that we're putting in down there needs a turn lane. You have the library, you have the county building, you have Kreider, you're gonna have this.
And the good part about this one, the volume of traffic will be really low compared to what a C2 commercial could
Right,
be. So
exactly.
the traffic generation on this parcel, this proposed land use, is very minimum compared to what could actually go on this 5 acres. And through our submittal process and working with MoDOT, any of those type of issues will come out. Any requests like that, any future planning, definitely we'll work with MoDOT on that for accessibility and so forth, for safety most importantly. But when you look at a 1.7 acre lot and you're looking at 13 parking places due to the use, it's very minimum. So, but most definitely, we want safety, it's imperative, and we will work with MoDOT on any requests, any considerations they have, most definitely.
Will residents be allowed to have their cars on site?
Yes, they will. Residents will be allowed to have cars. Now, I know some of the other ones we've done with other companies, not this one, they're very, very minimal.
And how many units, living units, will there be?
Living units in this? 13 or 18, yeah, it's 18 living units is what's on this one. And what we've seen, and not to say this will be the exact, what we've seen in some of our larger ones, it's not even by anywhere close to one per room. They're usually, we did the Heritage Point in Winksville, and if I remember correctly, it was 2.5 rooms to one vehicle. So most of them don't. It's an assisted living as part of it, so I know they have buses and so forth that can take the residents, and it's a care facility, so most of them don't have vehicles, what we've seen on other projects.
So
Kids all take the cars away.
Pardon me?
Kids all take the cars away.
I'm not saying that.
So the parking will be for staff, and how many staff will be there?
For staff, 5 staff at any given time.
5 staff.
And then
18
any
residents,
visitors.
Visitors. What about holidays?
Holidays, I mean, like I said, we've provided, the required code is 7, we've provided 13 for those.
But it's
types
conditional
of-
use,
Yes,
so, yeah,
yes.
for the particular use.
Yeah, for those
Beyond the
type of
requirements.
uses, we've provided 13, which is a little more. And on the holidays or anything like that, and when you look at 18, how many people can you really project for holidays? I don't know that we really can. But there is some area over here that could be some temporary parallel parking at that time. That on a holiday, you're not gonna have trash pickup, so that's not a big concern.
And the buses will be parked in those spots as well? Will we be able to staff
Well,
buses?
and I'm assuming an Oaks bus or something will be scheduled to pick them up, so they're just gonna swing in, go through the front door area to pick them up and move off. And it's not really a park situation, it's more of a service, and I don't think there's any plan to have any type of bus for this facility, no.
I know right now we're just talking about dividing the lot, but since we're asking all these other questions, is there a reason, what's the setback there from the corner of the parking lot to the, how much right of way have you allowed?
Well, there's 25-foot front yard setback from the right of way. So we're 25 feet back from the right of way before our parking lot even starts. And the building's gonna be, the building would actually be pushing probably 90 to 100 feet back from the right of way. Not from the roadway, but from the right of way.
Is there anything about the piece of property or the building that would prohibit the whole thing being moved back farther from 47?
It was just for the convenience and accessibility, so on and so forth. You're not driving to the rear, and with being residential back here, pulling it up to the front, trying to be a courteous neighbor and so forth.
Biggest problem I have is I'm still worried about that the frontage on the highway, because we've got to look to the future, and that's my only concern.
And that's what we'll definitely do with MoDOT is go through all that, because it is zone commercial, so there are going to be access points on there. Like I said, again, this is an assisted facility, so not to say any type of commercial use, what numbers they would have, but in our history, when we've done this, the volume of traffic is very, very minimum compared to anything else we do. And like I said, we'll work with MoDOT for safety factors, absolutely. That's a MoDOT requirement. So accessibility, access onto 47 is their decision and what requirements they have.
I think we both have the same concern as the fact that it might be too close to the highway. And if it goes ahead and goes at this plans, and then they come back and they do add the lane, then it's gonna start jumping into the setback lines.
Well, and that's what we've done. I think we've met all applicable codes for the city. So, I mean, what we've done is met the city's codes. We're not trying to ask for any variances or pushing any closer than required. We've met your codes for the distance away from.
But it's still a conditional use permit, Kurt.
Yes.
So they can add conditions to it related to this facility or the site.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's not just about meeting minimum codes.
Okay.
They can put conditions on that.
I think
Sure,
I think the
absolutely.
concern is that if MoDOT comes in 20 years and says, we're taking 25, I don't know how much they would take, but we're taking 25 feet of your front yard, and you're selling it to us because we're taking it. So we're gonna take that, and we're gonna widen the highway. How does that impact you at that time? Do you still have enough parking? Do you have, you know, is there availability to drive, to make a drive behind the back at that point and add some parking there? And I think, is that not the concern?
That's my concern, and it just looking ahead to the future, I mean, this is a big facility, and I assume that, you know, you want it to be open for a long time, and I'm just looking at that piece of property. I understand being respectful to the neighbors behind there, but, you know, just thinking to the future, I'd hate to have, you know, have to have the state or some other governmental entity buy their parking lot and at a huge cost, and, you know, it's just something that I'm thinking ahead. Would that be something that, if it could be moved back a little bit more?
What type of, a little bit more are you talking? I mean,
I'm not sure
are you
about
looking
that.
at 10 or 15 feet, something like that? Because
I guess I should ask, when the state came in previously, didn't they widen? How much did they take on each side? Say they needed a turn lane, so they wanted to take X amount of feet on each side of 47. What would be a comparable distance
guess
that the
that's
state would need for a turn lane?
For a single lane?
For a single, say a single turn
It's not
lane?
that wide.
no, you're talking like 12 feet.
Yeah, 12 feet.
So it'd be 6 feet on each side.
Well, that's if you're doing major improvements. I would not ever see for an additional turn lane, and we've done some work actually in this area, and I don't want to sit here and tell you there's enough room for a turn lane. I think there is, but I don't want to sit here and tell you that. If they were looking at 25 foot of taking, they're going to take 12 and a half from both sides is what they'll typically do.
And 12 and a half, what's the distance from the corner of that parking lot out to 47 to the far end? What's the distance?
To the far edge of the road or right away?
There's already 25 feet from the right of way.
Because, yeah,
so
we're
it's probably
10 or
closer to
15
35 feet.
from the
from
right
the edge
way
of the
into the
pavement.
roadway is another 10 or 15 feet. So from that road, generally speaking, from the edge of the 47 today, we're probably in the neighborhood of 35 feet.
Oh, okay. And that's to the corner of the parking lot?
Right.
That's-
Corner of the parking lot,
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Well, it's just hard to judge by looking here and can't see there even to blow it up, to know what the distance would be if 20 years from now, if they came and took 10 feet, you'd still have 25 feet to your parking lot. So that it would be a non-issue.
We had the same issue with a lot right across from that here not very long ago, wanted to make it commercial, and we denied that, and it all worked out to where the church bought that property.
Okay.
That worked out pretty good, so it's, at least could be widened over there anyway, one
Sure,
of these days.
sure, exactly.
All right. Anybody else have any questions about Warrior Acres Lot 2, Plat 1?
Well, we've discussed everything but the
I know.
plan.
We're ahead of the game on the other two issues.
But I would make a motion to accept the proposed Lot 2, Plat 1.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Scott, second by Mr. Cullum to accept the Warrior Acres Lot 2, Plat 1 subdivision plan 52. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Bart?
Yes. Motion passes 7-0 with 3 absent, and these things will be coming in front of the board on
The 16th?
December 16th. Thank you for reading my mind. At 7:30?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. Okay. So the next order of business will be the Harbor Place Site Plan 87.
That's a site plan approval request for the property that we just discussed during the subdivision, the proposed lot for Warrior Acres, Lot 2, Plat 1. The request is for the assisted living facility.
I know we just discussed this at length, and I don't see why it would still be unreasonable to ask for a couple extra feet of a couple extra feet to work with, whether it be 10 feet or 12 and a half feet. That's my personal thought.
The only thing to take into consideration is every foot that you're pushing that back, you're adding cost to the developer. It's cost for grading. As you see, the lot drops off in the back, you're adding extra costs for the material for the entrance. So just keep that in mind too, that any condition that you add as far as moving that is going to add
And that's actually
cost to the project.
And that would even be discussed under the conditional use anyway. Go ahead, sir.
Well, and my point is, and I think Jack makes a great point, obviously that's part of your position balancing this, but it is a site plan approval, it is a conditional use permit approval. So if, because of the special concerns and the historical that Mr. Durbin pointed out about Highway 47, 10 foot I think is very reasonable. I don't know that they would necessarily have an issue with it. I think you could ask the applicant, do you have a problem pushing it back 5, 7, or 10 feet? But it is a legitimate consideration, as I think Jack's point is a legitimate consideration. 10 feet may cost an extra $50,000 a year.
Well, and I think that for the discussion, there seems to be enough room there if there were an issue. And if there were an issue, it would be their cost down the line to provide parking somewhere else. And there's room on the lot to do it.
If even need be, because like you said, I have a 25-foot front setback and I have a 10-foot utility easement, so it's 35 foot from the actual asphalt to 47. So
To the parking lot.
to the corner of the parking lot, not even coming close to the building itself. So, I mean, if you pushed it five more feet in, you would still have 30 feet between the corner, the far corner of the parking lot and 47.
Now, if you moved it back 5 feet, you'd have 30 feet from the corner of the parking lot to the right-of-way. You're still going to have an additional 10 feet or however far that is from the actual edge of pavement.
Right.
Okay.
I don't have a scale.
That's why I'm trying to blow it up and actually.
Yeah, it's hard to fill on the drawing.
And talking to the owner right now, talking with MoDOT, I mean, they don't have any future plans for a turn lane or anything like that. And to add this additional cost, I mean, they're definitely not in favor of that for really the prophecy of what MoDOT will do. And none of us know. We deal in some very congested areas. And at times MoDOT says, we got plans for this one. We don't have any true hard fact plans. We know we're going to, one right now is the city of Wentzville. And some of the stuff we're doing, they know they're going to put a truck lane. They said, but we don't have any plans, so we can't ask for the right of way to move forward. We'll address any situation as it comes. And just talking to the owner at this point, his request is that we leave it where it is due to the economics of this. Moving it further back is an additional cost. We think there's ample room. Through conversation with the MoDOT, they've shown no inclination to turn lanes. So our request, with all due respect, would be leave it where it is, because as we look at 35 feet from the existing roadway today, even with this, looking at it, if MoDOT went right up to the right of way, I think we probably have the room for the turn lane where they wouldn't need additional right of way. So our request would be is to leave it where it is, with all due respect.
And there were a list of other things that you had requested, and they met all of those?
Yes.
And the sidewalk is on the sidewalk?
It's shown.
All right.
And I think one of the things you guys could do if you approved it, I think a couple of things, you could require that as a condition of site plan approval. You could require a traffic study. I don't know that that's necessary. I think one of the other things you could do is also ask Mr. Daniels, he says he believes it's not the case, to give a more definitive answer for when it comes in front of the board as far as what MoDOT's plans are and what the distances are there, because I don't think, Mr. Daniels, that would be.
No, definitely. If you gave your recommendation for approval with me discussing with MoDOT future plans, I have no problem with that.
And then bringing a report back.
Absolutely.
on the 16th.
And I think the other thing, in kind of going back to one of your concerns, you also can approve the site plan with the special condition it maintains a minimum of 13 spaces. To Mr. Durbin's point, where some of those spaces were taken away and it was, pavement, front door, on Highway 47 when they came in, you could make it a condition and then really put the burden on them that they maintain the 13 spaces on their property somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, and there, like you said, there is ample room to add those spaces if in the future at some time MoDOT decides
Yeah.
to.
But you could make it a condition, so
Do
they're
that.
required to maintain 13.
But they're only required to have 7.
Well, but you could make it a condition.
I understand
Yeah.
that, but by ordinance, or by,
Minimum
what we're
requirements,
in,
7.
right, minimum requirements are 7.
The minimum requirement seems a little low to me, but, considering how many residents are gonna be there, but, the 13 seems like it should be
Adequate.
Now, that would be something we would address on the conditional use.
Yes. You could do it on conditional use and site plan.
Or
that
on the site,
provision- yeah,
okay.
Provisions that require it. What you guys have done is consistently addressed them both, which I think is a really clean way to do it. Ms. Scott.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion. Carefully worded.
Okay, I'll give it a go. I would make a motion to approve the site plan as presented with the condition that there will be 13 parking spots on the property at all times in the future.
Would you want to rephrase that to say a minimum of 13?
Right, at least.
Then if for some reason in the future they want to add more, it won't restrict them?
Right.
No, they can only have 13. Okay, I would make that at least 13.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Mrs. Scott, second by Mr. Schoenfeld to approve Harbor Place Site Plan 87 with the added condition that they will always maintain at least 13 parking spots, regardless of what MoDOT does in the future. And I respect the fact that you cannot make decisions based on what they think they might do, but yet, under the next one, are we going to ask them to at least bring something, since we haven't voted yet, to the next Board of Aldermen about a report from MoDOT? Are we going to do that under the
I don't know that
condition?
you need to put it in the motion, I think, Kurt, you can
You'll just ask
take
them.
the report to Jack, and Jack can
Okay.
include it as packet.
So say, after having this discussion, sure you
Once that's done.
Yeah.
Because they're going to bring it
I don't
up.
think
They'll
we
bring it
have
up
to ask for
there.
that.
I'll have a conversation with MoDOT, you can guarantee that.
So we have a motion by
And
Mrs.
Rich,
Scott,
just-
second by Mr. Schoenfeld.
Just so you know, all my packets to the board, they include the minutes, all the minutes from the P and Z meeting for each specific item on their agenda. So they'll be aware of this
Okay.
request.
Any other questions or comments about the motion? Roll call vote?
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 with 3 absent. And that'll also come in front of the board on December 16th at 7 o'clock. And the last order of business will be our Harbor Place Conditional Use Plan or Permit 39, which I think we've discussed, but did you talk about all the other things were met?
Yeah, well, that was on the last one, on the site plan, it was a list of things that they requested additional information on, and that was, all those things were provided.
Anybody have any other questions or comments? Entertain a motion?
Make the motion to approve the conditional use with the stipulation that there always be at least 13 parking spots on the property.
At a minimum.
At least. Yeah, I didn't hear this time. But I can be redundant, at a minimum, at least at a
At least
minimum,
at a
there will
minimum.
be 13.
I'll second it.
Mr. Durbin? We have a motion by Mrs. Scott, second by Mr. Durbin, to approve the conditional use permit for Harbor Place with the condition, once again, that there will be a minimum of 13 parking spots at all times. going into the future. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote?
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cullen?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Did you get Mr. Schwab? Or did I
I'm sorry,
miss
Mr.
it?
Schwab.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 with 3 absence. And I'd like to thank Mr. Daniels for your patience tonight.
Thank you.
Good presentation, thank you. And Mr. Blanton as well. So at this time, we'll close the meeting and open it up to Mr. Hamp's Planning and Zoning Officer's report.
I would just like to verify what you guys have already discussed, that the planning and zoning meeting, we'd like to have it on the 8th, second Thursday next month due to the holiday.
I'm not busy on the 1st, but no, I'm just teasing. Is that all you got?
Yes, sir.
So we will definitely have one though, barring any.
What air conditioning?
Yeah. So, anybody else have anything for the good of the group? Entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Dickey, second by
Second.
Mrs. Scott. All in favor? Say aye. All opposed? Good night, thank you.